She took me to a rooftop dinner to witness my downfall, not to converse or mend our relationship, but to humiliate me. Lydia, the antagonist, was bursting with laughter at another man's jokes, her hand inappropriately close to his. The man, Brandon, Jim Muscles, flaunting a smug smile, a type of individual who considers flexing as a defining character trait. In that setting, I was the spouse, the afterthought. She didn't make an effort to disguise her actions. That evening, it wasn't just my marriage I lost. It was the self I had been quiet, loyal, blind that was buried beneath a restaurant chair, a linen napkin, and a bottle of overpriced wine. But I didn't remain shattered. This narrative recounts what transpired subsequently. The infidelity indeed, but more crucially, the reconstruction. The slow, agonizing process of recalling who I was before someone else determined my value. And if you've ever loved someone who misunderstood your kindness for vulnerability, if you've ever questioned whether you'd regain your wholeness amidst the wreckage, this tale is meant for you. Because I didn't merely endure it, I thrived beyond it. In the other side, I discovered tranquility. Firstly, thank you immensely for listening. If you're here, it signifies your readiness. For one who has journeyed through deafening silence, manipulation, and gradual erosion of trust, being understood is more profound than words can express. This narrative isn't about vengeance or accusation, it's about authenticity, mine. It's about the consequences when affection morphs into control, when devotion transforms into a tether, and the person to whom I offered my existence becomes the one who dismantles it. However, it's also about what ensues afterwards. If you've ever been rendered insignificant, substitutable, or invisible, this story resonates with you. If you've ever had to gather yourself fragment by excruciating fragment and learn anew how to inhale, the pages ahead will reflect your struggle. Not because our lives mirror each other, but because recovery communicates a language that transcends borders. So, take a breath, empty your thoughts, and join me on the night everything shattered, on the brink of self-destruction. In the depths of a strength I didn't recognize, my tale doesn't conclude here. It might be your beginning as well. Shall we delve into it? The setting is Camden, Washington. If that obnoxious fellow had uttered another word, I would have broken his jaw and transformed his smirk into an everlasting grimace. We were at a downtown Seattle rooftop bar, adorned with dim lights and overpriced hors d'oeuvres. The very thought of being there filled me with loathing. Lydia had informed me we needed to converse. I assumed it involved marriage counseling, or at least a ceasefire. However, I was taken aback by the deception, a trap. There he was, Brandon Kellerman, the coworker, someone I'd only heard about but never met. He was already there upon my arrival, donning a tailored navy blazer that seemed to have sprung from a stock photo shoot, his beard too precise, his hair too meticulously styled. He offered me a false half-smile, as if he had already triumphed, and Lydia, my spouse, was seated beside him, behaving as though they were on a date. Her hand rested casually on his arm as she laughed boisterously at something he'd said, laughter I hadn't heard in months. "Cam," she stated, pointing to the vacant chair opposite them. "This is Brandon. I've spoken of him before." Yes, indeed. She had on numerous occasions. He was her creative director, her artistic confidante, the one who grasped her creative essence. It had always been a suspicion of mine. I assumed my seat, maintaining a composed demeanor, but my hands were already balled into fists beneath the table. Then Brandon moved closer, his gaze fixed intensely on me, as if he was the antagonist in a mediocre Netflix thriller. "Let me be blunt, Camden. You have two options." He spoke without hesitation. "Depart, preserving your dignity, or remain and be annihilated." Lydia remained unfazed. She seemed reassured. My heart rate accelerated. I could barely discern the conversation over the pounding in my ears. I repeated his words internally, like an unfunny punchline. "Depart with your dignity, or stay and be demolished." He believed I would capitulate, that I would submit and allow them to obliterate me from my own existence. I took a breath, slowly released it, and met him gaze for gaze. "You want your jaw intact or wired shut?" I rose and swept the table, my action aimed at his visage. A wine glass cracked, staining Lydia's blouse with red. Shrieks echoed. Brandon attempted to stand, an ill-advised choice. I struck him firmly. Years of bitterness, sleepless nights, and isolation found expression in that punch. "Stop, Cam. You're disgracing me," Lydia shrieked, her actions adding to the embarrassment. After she dragged me there to discard me like a worn-out coat, security intervened. I was forcibly removed, blood on my knuckles, Brandon still gasping behind me. The cold air outside greeted me as the door clicked shut. Alone, yet somehow feeling lighter, I stood there without rage, but in quiet contemplation. In one harsh, undeniable fact, Lydia had led me there to witness my defeat. That rooftop dinner was not a confrontation, it was an ending. I wasn't disrupting an affair, I was being replaced in the script. She had orchestrated every glance, every smirk, every moment with Brandon as if it were a play, and I walked in unaware. Stand in reciting lines as she eyed her co-star bathed in candlelight. She once gazed at me like I was the sun's dawn. Now she regarded me with annoyance, chuckling at my sorrow amid ahai tartar bites. Yet, that night didn't crush me. Instead, it disconnected me, for I knew one fact. This wasn't an end. Upon reaching home, our condo felt amiss. Not untidy, not rearranged, simply odd. As if the atmosphere had changed, as if it had begun to forget I inhabited it. Her scent lingered in the hallway, but it wasn't merely hers. It was deeper, earthier, masculine Brandon's. I entered our room. The bed was immaculate, corners stiffly neat, something Lydia never bothered with. It felt clinical, like a space prepared for another. I seated myself. My hands still pulsed from the blow. My thoughts whirled, revisiting Brandon's smug grin, Lydia's cold glare, the warmth of her hand on his thigh. My phone vibrated. From her. "You didn't need to do that. Did you humiliate yourself? Are you all right now? Let's discuss this." All you can do is point fingers. Bitter and chilling. That was when I flipped the switch. I got up and began my investigation, not because I had doubts, but because I required evidence. Something tangible. Something authentic. I started with the closet. Everything appeared normal until I reached the shoe rack. A new pair, crimson stilettos. Shiny. Expensive. Lydia hadn't worn heels around me in months. Next, her vanity. Her tablet lay charging. Unlocked. She always believed I wouldn't pry. She was mistaken. The first image struck like a blow to the stomach. It was Lydia, scarcely dressed, posing in a hotel mirror. Timestamp, last weekend. She had claimed to be at her friend Kara's wine retreat in Walla Walla. Another swipe, and there he was Brandon. Naked from the waist up, brushing his teeth in the background. My breath hitched. My heart ached. More photos followed. Messages. Videos. And once again, silence descended. But it wasn't weakness this time. It was determination. Some of the files contained voice notes. His low, arrogant voice labeled her as his secret. Her response giggling, reminiscent of a teen sneaking past curfew. One recorded clip revealed she called him daddy. I almost threw my tablet in shock. They didn't merely cheat, they mocked me. Another message sent shivers down my spine. He still thought we were trying to save our marriage. Pity, poor baby. That message struck harder than the blows I had delivered to Brandon the previous night. Gradually, everything fell into place. The late nights at business meetings, the wine-stained getaways for girls only in Portland, the newfound affection for perfume she never wore for me, lingerie I hadn't seen before. The distance, the eye rolls, the way she froze when I touched her in bed. She wasn't mine for a long time. I was no longer her husband, I was simply a prop. A decoration to maintain appearances until it was convenient to vanish. The next morning, as if nothing had transpired, she sauntered into the kitchen as usual. With hair pulled back, devoid of makeup, casually drinking her cold brew, she appeared unfazed after setting off a storm in our lives the previous night. I was already seated at the dining table, tablet positioned before me, observing her, waiting. She lifted her gaze. Inquiringly, she asked, monotonously. I remained silent, merely pushing the tablet towards her, revealing their message thread on the screen. Her thumb scrolling paused. She halted. Her gaze shifted to the screen, and for the first time in months, she was speechless. Eventually, she looked up. Her voice showed no emotion. Why were you prying into my affairs? This was her response. No remorse, no denial, just a diversion so thin it reverberated within our silence. I leaned closer, whispering, "You lied. 4 months of deceit. You manipulated me, humiliated me, welcomed him into our existence, and treated me like an insignificant accessory. And now you're angry because I uncovered the truth." She dismissed it with a casual shrug, as if discussing the weather. "You've been dull, Cam. You surrendered. I needed something that stirred me emotionally." Brandon was the solution, but he could hardly utter a complete phrase without showing off his biceps. She smiled. At least he paid attention. At least I didn't feel ignored. That was when I realized she never truly loved me, just the concept of stability. I rose, moved towards the bedroom, began to pack. She trailed behind. "Are you departing?" I fastened the bag. I had already departed. "You have left, Cam," Lydia stated as I passed her in the corridor. "You merely lacked the courage to utter it out loud." I paused mid-stride. "What was that?" She raised her gaze to mine, eyes piercing, expression blank. "You were never a real man for me." I remained silent. I didn't grant her the pleasure of a response. I simply exited through the front door, a duffel bag on my shoulder, abandoning a woman I once considered home in a place now filled with another's cologne and shabby deceits. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. That night, I rented a temporary apartment in Belltown for bare walls. No recollections, no lingering sense in the atmosphere, no images staring at me from the fireplace. Just quietness, and quietness. It was harsh. I couldn't rest. Every time I tried to drift off, I saw Lydia with a smirk, while Brandon acted dominant at that rooftop dinner. Her gaze, it pierced through me as if I was merely background noise disturbing her ongoing story. The voice messages tormented me. That wasn't the Lydia I wed. That woman harbored dreams. She would sketch house blueprints on napkins and discuss adopting a rescue dog together. We used to stroll around Green Lake, holding hands, discussing names for children we hadn't conceived yet. Now she was murmuring words to Brandon that made me feel like I'd entered another person's nightmare. She ridiculed me, labeled me soft, predictable, and stated I'd likely perish while paying someone else's mortgage. And he laughed. Yes, he did. Let him. They didn't just betray me, they erased me. For 3 days, I ignored her calls. Absolutely no response. She never expressed remorse. She never apologized, merely texted about overreacting. "We can maintain civility. Let's discuss terms." It seemed like our marriage was an outdated rental contract. On the fourth day, she knocked on my door. I opened it, and there she stood, her hair loose, sans makeup, in the gray sweater she used to wear when we marathon Netflix shows on Sundays. She asked if we could talk. I moved aside, allowing her entry. She walked in as if she still owned me, taking a seat, crossing her legs nonchalantly, unfazed. "You've had your outburst," she said, voice sharp. "Now let's determine what happens next." I leaned against the counter edge, the cold stone providing stability amidst the growing turmoil within. "You behave as if you didn't just destroy everything we built," I retorted, voice soft. She sighed, dramatically, wearily. "It wasn't working, Cam. You distanced yourself. You stopped acknowledging me." I chuckled bitterly. "I saw you every day. I tried. But you withdrew. You grew distant. Instead of uttering a single word, you surrendered yourself to a gym-goer devoid of personality, giving him something that you swore belonged to me." "Don't exaggerate," she retorted, casting her eyes skyward. "It wasn't as if I orchestrated this situation. No, I approached nearer, then elaborated on the hotel bookings under your name, the lingerie tags in a Nordstrom bag, the selfies from mirrors, the voice messages, the videos." She recoiled slightly, but it was discernible, and clarify why Brandon presumed he had the authority to order me aside, as if I were simply encroaching upon my own existence. Her mouth formed a half-smile, half-snarl. "You're turning this into a crime scene." "No," I replied, my voice firming. "What you did was an act of murder. It was an assassination. You didn't just depart. You annihilated the man I was, and you failed to provide a burial for the remains." That resonated. She stood up abruptly, her chair grating against the floorboards. I craved more Cam. You don't understand. You abandoned effort, returning home, popping open a beer, repeating the same TV shows, transforming into a dull, monotonous version of the husband I wed. Instead of informing me, you began an affair with someone else and made me think it was my fault we were disintegrating. As she approached the door, you always played the role of the victim. Perhaps if you'd been more assertive. Stop, I commanded. I no longer have a wife. I never did. I had a leech, one that smiled while it drained me dry. She paused, her eyes dark, voice cold. Do you truly believe I didn't endure hardships too? I spent years feigning happiness. You didn't feign. You deceived. I retorted. You lied. And then she said it, lifelessly, devoid of emotion. I've been with Brandon for 6 months. And let me tell you, I feel alive once more. 6 months. While I was making plans for our anniversary dinner, she was busy whispering another's name. Yet I didn't cry. I simply breathed. I merely nodded. Good, I replied casually. Then you won't need to hear about what I did yesterday. Lydia furrowed her brow, dropped a bulky folder onto the table with a resounding thud. It was from the kitchen drawer. Her expression wavered, then she flipped it open. Inside were bank statements, transfer records, screenshots from her private emails, copies of Airbnb confirmations, and her second credit card I hadn't known about. There were also her conversations with Brandon, discussing moving her bonus into an undetectable side account. I employed a former detective I owed a favor 2 years ago. He didn't inquire, just executed the task. Lydia gaped at the folder, pale as a sheet. Camden, what's this? I met her gaze steadily. Proof. Her mouth opened, but no words emerged. I announced I was filing for divorce immediately and keeping everything. I'd already frozen the accounts. That new condo Brandon thinks you can afford, it's not yours. When he sees that folder, he'll understand the consequence of challenging someone you believed was too placid to retaliate. She reached towards the folder, but I pulled it away. It's over, I said. Leave. For the first time in weeks, her eyes faltered. A hint of fear. But it was already past that point. No more chances for insincere apologies cloaked in crocodile tears. The man who pleaded for her affection, who arranged solitary anniversary dinners, had ceased to exist on that rooftop. What remained instead wasn't furious, it was resolved. 3 days later, Brandon appeared outside my architecture firm. A daring move, a tough guy posture, leaning against his matte black Dodge Charger, arms crossed, sunglasses reflecting like he was auditioning for a follow-up to Drive. He spotted me exiting the parking garage. Camden, he called casually, as if we were arranging a casual drink. You have a moment? I didn't respond. I merely continued walking. He blocked my way. Hey, listen, man. I hadn't anticipated she would handle it this way. I thought she'd end things straightforwardly. I didn't wish for you to be part of that contentious dinner encounter, I repeated. I appraised him. He reeked of cologne and insecurity. I wasn't disposed towards games at the moment. I echoed your thoughts, calm but laden. You believed you could insinuate yourself into my wife's life, her embrace, and I faded away as if I had never been. Brandon spread his hands, palms upwards. I understand, man. You're angry. But let's not pretend she didn't make her own decisions. I didn't coerce her. I stepped forward. She decided, and so did you. Therefore, dismiss any notion of supplanting me in your mind. I moved nearer. You are not the dominant figure. You are a secondary character who overstepped boundaries. His smirk faltered. A fissure appeared in his facade. He informed me, puffing himself up again, she's considering moving in with me. Ideal, I said. She'll suit your Instagram well, right alongside your ego amidst your protein powder hoard. His jaw twitched. Camden doesn't intimidate me. If anything, it seems you're less intelligent than I assumed, was my response as I leaned forward, maintaining a calm demeanor. For a brief moment, there was a hint of unease in your expression, enough for me to perceive the vulnerability beneath the front. You're not cut out for confrontation. You're more accustomed to cameras and flattery. After that, I left. The most substantial harm wasn't going to come from a physical blow. It would stem from what I had prepared. Upon reaching my rented place, I reopened my laptop and delved back into the digital footprint she'd left behind. Bank statements, hotel expenses, spa services billed under our shared account, jewelry he wore, my money. She even transferred funds to an account under her sister's name. Careless, audacious, arrogant. Yet it was the nonchalance that struck me hardest, the casualness with which Lydia lied, how she so effortlessly said I love you while nestled in another man's arms. Every receipt I printed, every password I deciphered, every reckless message between her and Brandon. The trust I placed in you, that woman, is now irretrievable. My phone vibrated, displaying your name. Lydia. I waited before answering 3 times. You spoke, calmly. Camden, you said. What? I inquired. You didn't expect me to respond this way, you said. This way being a man who was deceived, betrayed, and treated insignificantly. You didn't intend to wound me, you claimed. The only thing I truly believe is that statement. Yes, you did, I retorted, keeping my voice low but resolute. You assumed I wouldn't retaliate. A brief silence filled the line. Your breaths were audible, shallow, and tense. He's not who I imagined, Lydia, you eventually admitted. I remained silent. I thought he would be robust, powerful. Instead, he was supposed to defend me from repercussions, to clear up the mess, to be the security blanket I once provided for you. Another pause. I erred. Closing my eyes, I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. No, Lydia, a blunder is overlooking buying milk. A slip-up is letting anger take control in an argument. What you did was far more than that. I released a deep breath. You constructed this deception, bit by bit, week after week, hotel bed after hotel bed. I paused for a moment. You hadn't anticipated that I would dismantle it as quickly as you built it. She attempted to speak again, but I had made up my mind. I ended the call. Her apologies and guilt were unnecessary. I had endured too long, allowing her to rewrite our narrative, distorting my image into one that was weak, insignificant, and unmemorable. But standing in that quiet rental apartment, clutching the proof of everything she wrecked, I found something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. This wasn't about retribution anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, my identity, my tranquility, my self-respect. Let her keep Brandon and his public image lifestyle. I had something more valuable: freedom, and I was going to make use of it. The divorce progressed faster than anticipated. Perhaps this was due to Lydia's reluctance to reveal much truth in court. She believed she could manipulate her way to a seamless separation. She pretended that her feelings had simply faded. However, when my lawyer displayed the financial evidence, every hidden theft, every undeclared reservation, every overlooked message, her demeanor shifted. There were no tears, no outbursts. Instead, it was cold, silent damage control. Our final encounter took place in a sanitized downtown office. It was impersonal, civil, and distant. She wore a navy suit without makeup, attempting to maintain composure. Like a woman who had never uttered another man's name in my car, she leaned forward during a pause, whispering, "Why are you doing this? You're humiliating us both." I remained focused ahead. "You're not ashamed of what you did," I said. "You're merely ashamed it cost you. You're only embarrassed people found out," I added. Lydia retreated, lips pressed, eyes sharp. But she didn't utter another word for the remainder of the mediation. Upon departure, I stood upright and empty-hearted. She exited with her mask shattered and a plaything of the gym waiting at the curb, parked in his matte black Charger, texting frantically like a stray dog. I assumed I'd find solace. I didn't. Betrayal doesn't bring celebration. No triumph after treachery, merely quiet despair and anesthetized feelings. Later, a gradual restoration followed. The worst were the sleepless nights. Not because I yearned for her, but due to the lingering reverberations. The silence that once housed her false laughter. The chilly half of the bed where she'd feign exhaustion. The moment I'd begin a text and recall her entangled in someone else's embrace. It wasn't about longing for Lydia. It was about retraining muscle memory. I took to the gym, not to emulate Brandon, nor to seek validation. I went to purge the sorrow, incinerate the anguish from my marrow, the venom, the embarrassment, the repressed rage. Gradually, I recollected myself, not shattered, not resentful, simply me. One evening, a colleague persuaded me to venture out to a Capitol Hill bar, insisting I should re-enter society. I almost declined, but an inner voice urged me to go. It was there that I encountered Rachel, Lydia's sister. She froze upon seeing me at the bar, then approached after a moment. "Camden," she said, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." I responded with the same surprise. She glanced at her drink before meeting my gaze. "I heard everything. I'm sorry." I simply nodded. "Don't be," she added. "You didn't betray me." She offered a gentle, remorseful smile. "I attempted to dissuade you, you know. When I found out, she told me to stay out of it." Not unexpectedly. Rachel studied me, leaning on the bar. "Are you all right?" I nonchalantly shrugged. "Some days are better than others." She was aware, she implied. Lydia always craved attention. "She needed to triumph," I remarked, observing the spin of whiskey in my glass, even if it resulted in damaging something precious. Rachel didn't respond immediately. Instead, she just gazed into her drink, lips compressed in a firm line. After a while, softly, she replied, "Only Lydia truly cherished herself." This struck me harder than anticipated, and surprisingly, that truth brought some relief. That night, I wandered the streets of Ballard under a tranquil, silent sky. One of those rare Seattle nights when the air felt purified, as if something oppressive had finally been removed, like toxins were expelled from your body unnoticed. For the first time in what seemed an eternity, I smiled, not out of triumph or revenge, but because I realized what tranquility tasted like. No more deceit, no more anticipation for apologies that would never materialize. And nothing, not Lydia, not Brandon, not even the phantom of the man I used to be, could rob me of that clarity. A little over a week later, I received an unexpected message from Brandon that left me taken aback. He proposed a face-to-face discussion, man to man. It was almost comical considering the same individual who once postured before me like a schoolyard bully now sought camaraderie. My initial reaction was to dismiss him, but the allure of intrigue proved too strong. I agreed to meet in a public setting for neutral ground. I selected a secluded coffee shop along Fremont's edge. He arrived late, appearing altered, less vigorous, disheveled, and his shirt wrinkled. His eyes bore shadows, and he seemed sluggish. After a prolonged silence of 30 seconds, he confessed, "I believe I erred. She's not what I anticipated." Upon hearing this, I remained silent. "She's poison," he continued, uttering the word as if it left a bad taste in his mouth. I leaned back in my chair, nodding in unspoken understanding. He went on to reveal that she had spoken of me, like a confession, stating I didn't care. You hadn't interacted with her for months. Yet he feigned disbelief. He avoided eye contact. I raised an eyebrow in skepticism. "And you believe that?" He looked away, sheepish. I wanted to confront him about it. And there it was. The truth. He wanted to pin the blame on me so he could justify his actions. He admitted she was seeing someone else at last, in a low voice. This revelation made me pause. "Wait," I said. "She's cheating on you," I accused. Brandon nodded slowly, the guilt etched deeply on his face. "She met him at some yoga class," he disclosed. "A man with a boat. A charmer who wore beads. He insisted it was nothing more than friendship. Claimed I was overreacting. He rubbed his temples, visibly stressed. But he recognized the telltale signs now. The late messages. The women's getaway in Spokane. The new lingerie that mysteriously didn't end up in the laundry. He looked at me, his eyes lackluster. It felt like a repeat of old times. But this time, I was you. I should have felt victorious, satisfied. Instead, I felt drained. "You played your role, Brandon," I said, keeping my voice even. "You'll witness the opposite perspective now." He sighed deeply. "I doubt she's capable of true affection." "She isn't," I replied. "All she can manage is seeking approval. And once that approval wanes, she finds a different admirer." He remained silent, merely brooding in the turmoil he had stirred. I rose, pushing back my chair. "Good luck, pal." I meant it. He blinked. "You're no longer angry," I told him, slinging my coat over my shoulder. "But anger is burdensome. and I've borne enough of it already. Outside, the sun pierced the gloomy April sky, casting a sacred, warm, clean glow on me. I walked leisurely, inhaling the salty breeze blowing in from the sound. I felt unencumbered. That evening, I sat barefooted on my porch, a glass of bourbon in hand, surrounded only by the creaking wood and the occasional hum of passing vehicles. No ringing phone, no insincere apologies, no skillfully fabricated lies. Just solitude. Funny how betrayal initially feels like death, but later transforms into a new start, a harsh reset, a shedding off of old layers. After the divorce ended, Lydia phoned once, leaving a voicemail I never played. I erased it before her voice could taint the quiet. She didn't receive closure. She didn't get the final say. That was mine now. I resumed my travels again. Weekend hikes, road trips, things I had neglected while trying to preserve a lifeless marriage. I re-established contact with my brother, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Lydia labeled him toxic. However, he simply saw through her. Rachel texted occasionally, never excessively, just to touch base. A joke. A reminder that not everyone sought something from me. I valued her actions. She allowed me to simply exist. Unexpectedly one night, without any lead-up, Lydia sent me a picture of an old Christmas celebration from several years ago. There I was, grinning with her and the entire family united together. For a prolonged period, I fixedly gazed at that photograph, the authentic grin etched on my face, the manner in which I once clutched her hand. Back then, it wasn't a charade, it wasn't feigned. She was. That was the distinct contrast. I have learned to cease lamenting what never truly existed. The affection I assumed we harbored, the matrimony I supposedly partook in, it was my reality, not hers, and that recognition, it carried immense significance. For now, I possess something she will never acquire: tranquility, responsibility, a spirit untarnished when the falsehoods finally came tumbling down. While she likely remains out there pursuing that transient euphoria, the next man who will venerate her until he ultimately perceives beyond her smile, I am rebuilding. Gradually, with something genuine. As time progressed and seasons changed, I ceased reckoning days and instead rejoiced in the minor triumphs, awakening without the persistent ache in my chest, consuming without the lingering bitter taste of apprehension, slumbering peacefully through the night without recurring dreams of her voice whispering falsehoods. One day, I found an email from Lydia with Camden as the subject. It requested I listen to what she had to say. I paused, scrutinizing the message for 5 minutes before clicking it open. Lydia acknowledged that I likely didn't want to hear from her, but felt compelled due to its significance. She confessed to making mistakes, Brandon was gone, and she was left alone. Her words poured out in a letter detailing her thoughts about us, her actions, and their consequences. She didn't seek forgiveness, but desired me to comprehend that she had been lost, causing pain unintentionally and seeking some emotion, any emotion. She conceded, painfully, that I was the only one who truly saw her when she was around. She hinted that perhaps she took me for granted. I read her message twice, then deleted it without responding because she never truly wanted me, not in the past, and not now. She didn't desire the revised version of me, the one who no longer yearned for affection masked as crumbs of attention from her. Instead, she longed for the man I once was, the one who bent and shrank to accommodate her definition of happiness, suppressing my own needs into silence to maintain harmony. However, that individual ceased to exist the moment she publicly humiliated me, viewing me as excess burden she couldn't wait to discard. What Lydia truly yearned for wasn't me. It was the sense of security I provided, the loyalty, and the solace in knowing someone would always clean up the emotional debris left by her. She missed my adoration, not me. And by that time, I had already begun seeing someone else named Claire. I stumbled upon her serendipitously at a bookstore nestled between a florist and a bakery in Queen Inn. The book I dropped was a well-worn copy of The Stranger by Camus. She grabbed it, peeked at the title, and commented, "A heavy read, yet your eyes radiate kindness." We conversed for an hour near the philosophy section, followed by coffee, then strolls through Discovery Park, then silence for several weeks due to my need for solitude. I informed her about my scars. She merely smiled and replied, "That's great. Scars indicate healing." Claire didn't push me, didn't probe. She simply appeared consistent, kind, honest. With her, everything seemed effortless, no pretense, no fragile emotions. She seldom mentioned Lydia, only once. It was following my phone vibrating and my sudden freeze upon recognizing that name. "You don't owe me the tale," she said. "But if you ever wish to share it, I'll be here." And I did. On a peaceful Sunday, with raindrops tapping on the windows, her hand in mine, I shared everything, not for sympathy, but simply to release it. Claire didn't interject. She didn't ask for more. Upon completion, she said, "That tale wasn't about you." Her shattered image sought its mirror, a line etched in my mind. A few weeks later, I passed our old house, the one that once held sanctity. It appeared diminished now, worn out. The lawn was unkempt, shutters askew, as if it had renounced any attempt to impress. I did not halt. I merely drove on. Yet I smiled, not in mockery nor victory, but because I endured. Lydia once labeled me fragile. She erred, underestimating my resilience, presuming I'd disintegrate without her, that I'd succumb to the turmoil she instilled in every room. But here I stood, unbent, marked, confident, yet unfaltering. The tempest had passed, and it left little more than a cleared pathway. Now I perceive clearer, trust more keenly, stride more assuredly, laugh more profoundly. There exists an odd tranquility in losing everything. Strips you down to essentials, making you treasure what truly matters, moments such as mornings with unstressed black coffee or evenings encircled by a voice that's not laden with hidden tension, a voice gentle and sincere. Real love doesn't come crashing in like a wrecking ball. Instead, it treads softly and endures when all else fades away. It was a crisp autumnal Friday evening in Seattle, the type where the sky darkens to a deep navy and the air carries an aroma of fresh starts. From my new, cozier living space's balcony, I observed Claire within, humming whilst moving about the kitchen barefoot, lost in a rhythm only she could hear. For a while, I watched her through the glass, and a sense of calm washed over me. Peace, not feigned, genuine, earned by trudging through betrayal and emerging with your soul intact. Lydia, less frequent in thought, yet lingers like a hazy, surreal memory, tinged with fleeting pangs that no longer hurt as they once did. A name from a bygone era, she was. Brandon, merely a side note, a lesson learned. I discovered that love without regard isn't sweet, it's venomous. That fidelity sans honesty is but a tether. That some individuals only know to drain until you forget the riches you once possessed. Yet, I also grasped that surviving betrayal doesn't fashion bitterness. It bestows awareness. It stirs gratitude when tenderness returns. Claire emerged outside, ensconced in a shawl, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Are you all right?" she queried. I acknowledged with a nod. Affirmative, merely pondering. On her, perhaps. I hesitated, then smiled, contemplating how far I've journeyed. She refrained from probing further. It wasn't necessary. Certain tales don't necessitate repetition. Their conclusions speak volumes. Not everyone requires contempt. They simply need comprehension, followed by separation. I gazed upon the horizon, where the sun softly descended into Puget Sound, tinting the sky with amber and deep navy. A new phase was underway. No fanfare, no vengeance, only truth. If I could address the past self at that rooftop eatery, heart pounding with every feigned laugh Lydia offered that man, I'd say this: "You will not shatter. She'll attempt to persuade you it was you, that you were the burden, that you didn't do enough, say enough, be enough. But you were. You were the anchor, the stability, the one who remained. You were the pulse in a union that had ceased beating long before you recognized. And when she departs, believing she's racing towards something superior, she's not. She's merely fleeing from her own reflection. Allow her to leave, heal, develop. Recall your essence prior to her constant whispers echoing in your mind. In due time, when authentic love reappears, it won't be frantic or insincere. Instead, it will be tender, persistent. It won't amplify its tone to grab attention, nor hide behind turmoil for thrill. It will materialize and remain. Claire extended her hand across the tiny balcony table towards me. My gaze shifted towards her, and for a fleeting moment, everything within me paused. She wasn't attempting to mend or fulfill or sculpt me. She simply observed me, completely, without discomfort. And in her gaze, I recognized something I hadn't seen in a protracted period, a sense of belonging. Not the sort associated with property deeds or family portraits or well-manicured gardens, but the kind that dwells in presence, in tranquility, in how someone holds your hand without inquiring about your trembling. I looked at her and admitted it. Not instinctively, not to fill the void, but because it was accurate. I'm content. She smiled, nestled against my shoulder, and murmured affirmatively, correct. And this time? This time I conveyed sincerity. Have you followed me thus far, witnessing each falsehood, each wound, and every silent stride towards reconstruction? Then I ask you a question. What would your actions have been in my situation? Truly, I want to hear your thoughts. Post a comment, not just for my sake, but for those elsewhere grappling with their own form of deceit. Let them comprehend they're not solitary. Let me grasp the same sentiment. This narrative wasn't merely about a collapsed marriage or an affair. It was about losing oneself and struggling to regain oneself. If you resonated with anything here, if you detected echoes of your own tale in these words, don't remain quiet. Speak out. Share your insights. Address the former me who believed he wouldn't endure the repercussions. My tranquility is found now, but your words might bring solace to others. In closing, I offer you a sentiment that I wish someone had shared with me earlier. Never allow another's turbulence to persuade you that you are the source of the problem. Love shouldn't erode your essence. It shouldn't necessitate concealment. If a situation leaves you feeling excessively drained, pause and ponder the reason. Love ought to bolster, not annihilate. To everyone perusing this message, mend noisily. Grant yourself forgiveness initially. And when you encounter something positive again, invite it in. You merit unconditional selection. You merit tranquil sunrises, truthful gazes, laughter that doesn't inflict pain. If you're already embracing this reality, impart it. Elucidate what liberation means to you now. Here I deposit my tale. Now I yearn for yours. Share it below. I'm attentive. Camden.